Good day everyone, I am Rogie Ann A, Aca-ac, and together with my groupmates, we will be discussing Chapter 3 of our module which tackles the external assessment. This chapter examines the tools and concepts needed to conduct an external strategic management audit. This chapter also presents a practical framework for gathering, assimilating, and analyzing external information. And lastly, the industrial organization view of strategic management is introduced. With that being said, let's dive more into what's with external assessment. We are all expecting that you are all ears in listening and understanding our video presentation. Thus, at the end of it, you are all expected to do the following. First is to describe how to conduct an external strategic management audit. Second is to discuss 10 major external forces that affect organizations, the economic, social, cultural, demographic, environmental, political, governmental, legal, technological, and competitive. Third is to describe key sources of external information, including the internet. Four is to discuss the important forecasting tools used in strategic management. Fifth is to discuss the importance of monitoring external trends and events. Sixth is to explain how to develop an EFA matrix. Seventh is to explain how to develop a competitive profile matrix. Eighth is to discuss the importance of gathering competitive intelligence. Ninth is to describe the trend toward cooperation among competitors. And lastly is to discuss market commonality and resource similarity in relation to competitive analysis. What does external assessment or external audit means? As stated right here, external audit focuses on identifying and evaluating trends and events beyond the control of a single firm, such as increased foreign competition, an aging society, consumer fear of traveling, or it may also be stock market volatility. In external audit, we have to remember these two key factors, the opportunities and threats. This means that external audit aims to explore or reveal the opportunities and threats that the organization or company is facing so that the managers can formulate strategies to take advantage of the opportunities as well as to avoid or reduce the impact of the threats identified. So ito talaga yung kailangan nating tandaan patungkol sa external assessment or external audit. Opportunities are to be taken advantage of, whereas the threats are to be avoided. But when it occurs already, the impact of those should be reduced. The nature of an external audit. The purpose of an external audit is to develop a finite list of opportunities that could benefit a firm and threats that should be avoided. So as the term finite suggests, the external audit is not aimed at developing an exhaustive list of every possible factor that could influence the business. Rather, it is aimed at identifying key variables that offer actionable responses. This simply means that the company should come up with feasible and realistic strategies or responses. Dito sa external audit, hindi lang tayo basta-bastang naglilista ng mga possible opportunities that might influence the business. It shall be noted that it should be actionable, which means kayang gawin, actionan, or i-implement ng organization. We only need to look for the key variables. Thus, firms should be able to respond offensively or defensively to the factors by formulating strategies that take advantage of external opportunities or that minimize the impact of the potential threats. This figure right here is a comprehensive strategic management model. It illustrates how the external audit fits into the strategic management process. As we can observe, the process is quite long and complex as well. But the first step is to formulate or develop vision and mission statements, which was already discussed in Chapter 2, so I believe alam na natin kung paano gumawa ng vision and mission statements. Right after that ay ang pagsasagawa ng external audit as well as the internal audit, which will be discussed by the next group. Before establishing the long-term objectives, we shall examine first the possible opportunities as well as the threats that the organization may face para maging firm yung madidevelop nating objectives kasi yun yung magiging ilaw or like kumbaga direksyon sa kung paano natin ima-manage ang business. So we will see to it talaga na ang long-term objectives na na-establish natin ay naka-align doon sa mga strategies natin on how to maximize the opportunities and avoid or reduce the impact of the threats, which is the goal or purpose of the external audit. And the other steps will be discussed by the succeeding report presentations. We have here the key external factors. External factors are divided into 5 broad categories. First is the economic forces. Second is the social, cultural, demographic, and natural environment forces. Third is the political, governmental, and legal forces. Fourth is the technological forces. And fifth is the competitive forces. These key external factors should be important to achieving long-term and annual objectives, measurable, applicable to all competing firms, and hierarchical in the sense that some will pertain to the overall company and others will be more narrowly focused on functional areas. These categories shall be discussed thoroughly by my other groupmates, but changes in external factors not just affects the organization. So let's try not to jump directly into the bigger picture, but rather himay-himay natin kung ano-ano yung mga maaapektuhan if may changes man sa mga forces na ito. Kasi 'di ba, ang complex ng corporate world as well as the world market. Kaya let's try to look into what's more when we speak of an organization. So, any change in any of these forces or factors affects the following. We have competitors, suppliers, distributors, creditors, customers, employees, communities, managers, stockholders, labor unions, governments, trade associations, special interest groups, the products, services, markets, as well as the natural environment. Let's say, for example, an external trend or event occurs such as global economic recession. It significantly affects the products, services, markets, and organizations worldwide. Thus, a particular external trend occurs may affect 2 or more of these sectors. Another example could be the recent conflict happened between Russia and Ukraine. Diba, as we all know, hindi lang ang mga countries na to ang naapektuhan but rather ang buong mundo lalo na ang world economy. Ano-ano nga ba ang mga naging epekto nito? Unang-una ay ang pagtaas ng presyo ng gasolina which directly increases the inflation rates. And by that, naapektuhan ang lahat ng mga sektor. Actually, pero nakakahigit na naapektuhan ay ang mga customers dahil ang mahal na ng mga bilihin pero ang kita nila ay stagnant pa rin, hindi ba? Like, ang taas ng inflation rate ngayon lalong-lalo na which is very reflective naman sa presyo ng gasolina. Changes in external forces translate into changes in consumer demand for both industrial and consumer products and services. External forces also affect the types of products developed, the nature of positioning and market segmentation strategies, the type of services offered, and the choice of businesses to acquire or sell. External forces directly affect both suppliers and distributors. Thus, it is indeed important to identify and evaluate external opportunities and threats as it also enables to the organization to develop a clear mission, to design strategies to achieve long-term objectives, and to develop policies to achieve annual objectives. Let us also discuss the process of performing an external audit. In performing an external audit, it must involve many managers and employees as possible, as their involvement in the strategic management process can lead to understanding and commitment from organizational members. So first, the company must gather competitive intelligence and information about economic, social, cultural, demographic, environmental, political, government, legal, and technological trends. Individuals or the managers and employees can be asked to monitor various sources of information such as key magazines, trade journals, and newspapers. After monitoring ay magsasubmit sila ng report sa committee na nag-handle ng external audit. And by this process, it provides a continuous stream of timely strategic information and involves many individuals in the external audit process. Aside from these individuals, the Internet also provides another source for gathering strategic information, pati na rin ang corporate, university, and public libraries. Other sources of vital information include suppliers, distributors, customers, and the competitors. And once the information is gathered, it shall then be assimilated and evaluated. There should be a series of meetings wherein i-discuss ng mga managers kung alin doon sa mga nakalista na opportunities ang pinaka-importante as well as the threats na kinakaharap ng firm. A prioritized list of these factors may also be obtained by requesting that all managers rank the factors identified. But we also have to take note that these key external factors can vary over time and by industry. If meron ng final list of key external factors, then it should be communicated and distributed widely in the organization. So that's it for my part. I hope you have learned something from my discussion. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day everyone. My name is Princess Hania Aminoding, one of the reporters of this chapter. Without further ado, let us proceed on the industrial organization view and economic forces. So, industrial organization is a field of economics dealing with the strategic behavior of firms, regulatory policy, antitrust policy, and market competition. So, industrial view of strategy assumes that the external environment determines the action a firm can deploy. So, the industrial organization approach to competitive advantage advocates that external factors are more important than internal factors in a firm achieving competitive advantage. Proponents of the industrial organization view, such as Michael Porter, contend that organizational performance will be primarily determined by industry forces. It focuses on analyzing external forces and industry variable such as a basis for getting and keeping competitive advantage. So, competitive advantage is determined largely by competitive positioning within an industry, according to IO advocates. Managing strategically from the IO perspective entails firms striving to compete in attractive industries, avoiding weak or faltering industries, and gaining a full understanding of key external factors relationships within that attractive industry. So IO research provides important contribution to our understanding of how to gain competitive advantage. Industrial organization theorists contend that external factors in general and the industry in which a firm chooses to compete has a stronger influence on the firm's performance than do the internal functional decisions managers make in marketing, finance, and the like. Firm performance, they contend, is primarily based more on industry properties such as economic of scale, barrier to market entry, product differentiation, the economy, and level of competitiveness than on internal resources, capabilities, structure, and operations. The global economic recession's impact on both strong and weak firms has added credence of late to the notion that external forces are more important than internal. Above all, industrial organizations focuses on how markets and industries compete with one another by factoring in real-world complications such as government intervention in the marketplace, transaction costs, barriers to entry, and more. Let's go to economic forces. Economic factors have a direct impact on the potential attractiveness of various strategies. For example, when interest rates rise, funds needed for capital expansion become more costly or unavailable. Also, when interest rates rise, discretionary income declines and the demand for discretionary goods falls. When stock prices increase, the desirability of equity as a source of capital for market development increases. Also, when the market rises, consumer and business wealth expands. An economic variable of significant importance in strategic planning is gross domestic product, especially across countries. Trends in the dollar's value have significant and unequal effects on companies in different industries and in different locations. For example, the pharmaceutical, tourism, entertainment, motor vehicle, aerospace, and forest products industries benefit greatly when the dollar falls against the yen and euro. So as shown in the table is the list of the GDP of various countries in Asia for all of 2009. Unlike most countries in Europe and the Americas, most Asian countries expect positive GDP growth in 2009. A low value of the dollar means lower imports and higher exports. It helps US companies' competitiveness in world markets.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day to all of you. I am Abdulmalik Tasnima and I will continue the discussion on the next two broad categories of external forces, specifically the social, cultural, demographic, and natural environment forces, and also the political, government, and legal forces. So we will first discuss the social, cultural, demographic, and natural environment forces. Social, cultural, demographic, and environmental changes have a major impact on virtually all products, services, markets, and customers. These highly impact the functioning of organizations in an economy as these forces determine the demand and supply for industrial output and various services in an economy. So usually, yung mga companies, they plan their marketing activities, kung paano nila i-promote yung products and services nila, and also planning for other strategies, and usually, it is seen that all the firms in an industry plan their marketing activities and other strategies according to the current inclination of these forces. Small, large, for-profit, and non-profit organizations in all industries are being studied and challenged by the opportunities and threats arising from the changes in social, cultural, demographic, and environmental variables. So on the next slide, we will discuss social, cultural, demographic, and natural environment forces and on how they can create opportunities and threats to businesses. So to better understand these forces on how they can affect companies, we will define each of them. So first, social forces. Social forces actually are the current social factors that are visible in the economy. It can be particular beliefs, ideologies in a specific direction. For example, tayong mga Muslims, we believe that pork is haram. Thus, this is a threat for businesses that are concerned with pork if yung business na yan is within an area na mas marami yung Muslims. For example, Marawi City. Second is the cultural forces. Cultural forces are that factors that decide what kind of culture is there in a particular region, like the traditions followed by people, their overall behavior and likings, thought patterns, lifestyle, and etc. For example, about the lifestyle of Americans regarding beer and wine consumption. Accordingly, beer consumption in the United States is growing at only 0.5% per year, whereas wine consumption is growing 3.5%. So based on this example, mas prefer ng Americans yung wine compared to beers. Thus, for a wine company such as Gallo, this trend is an opportunity, whereas for a firm such as Adolf Coors Brewing, this trend is an external threat. Third is the demographic forces. These forces are the ones that define things like the age of the people, gender ratio, occupational structure, family size, marital status, and etc. The aging American population affects the strategic orientation of nearly all organizations. Americans are getting older. Accordingly, individuals aged 65 and older in the United States comprise 13% of the total population, and because of this, an apartment complexes for the elderly were built. These complexes are called life care facilities, which now exceed 2 million. So this is an opportunity for for-profit companies who build complexes for elderly, for example, these life care facilities. Some of these companies building these facilities include the Avon, Marriott, and Hyatt. Now, lastly is the natural environment forces. The natural environment forces are the state of natural resources in an economy, the current condition of environment, and etc. So usually, kapag marinig natin ng word na natural environment, what comes to our mind is the weather and the climate change. And this affects businesses. For example, businesses who sell cold foods, for example, ice cream. So obviously, kapag winter season, wala namang bibili ng ice cream in that state. So that is a threat for such businesses. But of course, if summer season naman, this is an opportunity to them. Enumerated in this slide are the key social, cultural, demographic, and natural environment forces. You can just read them here, but you can also find it in our PDF. So now we will move on to the third category of external forces, which is the political, governmental, and legal forces. Federal, state, local, and foreign governments are major regulators, deregulators, subsidizers, employers, and customers of organizations. Political, governmental, and legal factors therefore can represent key opportunities or threats for both small and large organizations. Thus, for industries and firms that depend heavily on government contracts or subsidies, political forecast can be the most important part of an external audit. For example, changes in patent laws, antitrust legislation, tax rates, and lobbying activities can affect firms significantly. The increasing global interdependence among economies, markets, governments, and organizations makes it imperative that firms consider the possible impact of political variables on the formulation and implementation of competitive strategies. The political, governmental, and legal forces may include taxes, laws, and political stability. Government can raise or lower corporation tax, which will impact profits of the businesses. They can also affect businesses by increasing value-added tax, and this is very evident nowadays. Di ba ngayon ang mahal na ng mga bilihin? That is because of the value-added tax. In addition, they can also bring in new laws like the national minimum wage, which will impact profits. For example, if malaki yung minimum wage, then mas rarami rin yung customers ng mga businesses who are more concerned on wants items, thus increasing profits. Kapag maliit naman, siguro, liliit din yung profit nila because individuals will focus more on their needs rather than on their wants. Also, government can also introduce new health protocols which can also affect the way businesses work. Local, state, and federal laws, regulatory agencies, and special interest groups can have a major impact on the strategies of small, large, for-profit, and non-profit organizations. Many companies have altered or abandoned strategies in the past because of political or governmental actions. For example, in the face of a deepening global recession, countries worldwide are resorting to protectionism to safeguard their own industries. European Union, for example, have tightened their own trade rules and resumed subsidies for various of their own industries while barring imports from certain other countries. The European Union recently restricted imports of US chicken and beef. India is increasing tariffs on foreign steel. Russia perhaps has instituted the most protectionist measures in recent months by raising tariffs on most imports and subsidizing its own exports. Russia even imposed a new toll on trucks from the European Union, Switzerland, and Turkmenistan. As more and more companies around the world accept government bailouts, companies are being forced to march to priorities set by political leaders. Enumerated here are some political, governmental, and legal variables. You can just find this in our PDF. So the organization or the government should take into account the major social, cultural, demographic, natural environment, political, governmental, and legal forces, because if they will not, then decisions will be wrong to a great extent. The reason is that these forces are the guiding elements for operation and the strategies that should always be modified as per the current behavior of such forces. So that is all for my report, and the next presenters will report on the remaining topics. And thank you.
Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. I am Norhanna C. Abubakar and I will continue the discussion of the previous reporter. So I will be discussing the next few slides. Now again, as discussed by the previous reporters, external factors can be divided into 5 broad categories. First is the economic forces. Second, we have social, cultural, demographic, and natural environmental forces. And then third, we have political, governmental, and legal forces. Fourth, we have technological forces. And lastly, we have competitive forces. And already discussed are the first 3 categories. And to continue, I would be discussing the last 2 categories, which is the technological forces and the competitive forces. Now, let us proceed with technological forces. So, technological forces influence organizations in several ways. A technological innovation can have a sudden and dramatic effect on the environment of a firm. Of course, when we are into technological forces, Internet plays an important role. The Internet affects operational effectiveness and strategic positioning in very different ways. The Internet has changed the very nature of opportunities and threats by altering the life cycle of products, and then nag-increase na yung speed ng distribution or mas napapadali na, and then meron nang nakakreate na new products and services, nawawala na rin yung limitations of traditional geographic markets and others. So, the Internet is altering economies of scale, changing entry barriers, and redefining the relationship between industries and various suppliers, creditors, customers, and competitors. So with Internet, there are a lot of opportunities in business world at the same time, threats. Now, to effectively capitalize on e-commerce, a number of organizations are establishing 2 new positions in their firms. So first, we have the Chief Information Officer or the CIO, and second, we have the Chief Technology Officer or the CTO. So this trend reflects the growing importance of IT, the information technology in strategic management. So the CIO is more of a manager. Sila yung nagmamanage ng firm's relationship with their shareholders, and then si CTO is more of a technician. So nagfo-focus sila sa mga technical issues such as data acquisition, data processing, decision support systems, and software and hardware acquisition. So these two actually work together to ensure na yung mga information needed to formulate, implement, and evaluate strategies is available when it is needed. So these individuals are responsible for developing, maintaining, and updating the company's information database. Now, as I've said a while ago, since technological forces represent major opportunities and threats in an organization, these must be considered in formulating strategies, since we all know that technological advancement can dramatically affect the organization's products, services, markets, suppliers, the customers, and even the competitive position of an organization. Now, with the advancement of technology, an organization can create new markets, they can change the relative competitive cost positions in an industry, and they can also render existing products and services obsolete. So, technological advancements can actually create new competitive advantages that are more powerful than yung mga existing na advantages. So, actually, no company or industry today is insulated against emerging technological developments. So, actually, sa mga high-tech industries, identification and evaluation of key technological opportunities and threats can be the most important part of the external strategic management audit. That's why these technological forces is really important sa external strategic management. So it is very evident talaga na the pace of technological change is increasing and literally wiping out businesses every day. That's why firms should pursue strategies that take advantage of technological opportunities to achieve sustainable competitive advantages in the marketplace. However, not all sectors of the economy are affected equally by technological developments. The communications, electronics, aeronautics, and pharmaceutical industries are much more volatile, or they are more into changes than the textile, forestry, and metals industries. So remember, not all sectors talaga of the economy are affected equally when it comes to technological advancement or technological developments. So we have here some examples of the impact of wireless technology. Many airlines now offer wireless technology in flight, and then for vehicles naman or automotive, they are now becoming wireless. And then for banking, Visa sends text messages alerts after may mga unusual na transactions. And then for education, many secondary and even college students may use smartphones, and just like today, we are into online class wherein smartphones gadgets are needed. And then energy. Smart meters now provide power on demand in our home or businesses. And then for healthcare, patients can use mobile devices to monitor their own health, such as calories consumed. And then hotels, day-ins sends daily specials and coupons to hotel guests via text messages. And then for market research, cell phones respondents or smartphone respondents provide more honest answers because they are away from eavesdropping ears, of course. And then for politics, President Obama won the election party by mobilizing Facebook and MySpace users, revolutionizing the political campaigns. And then lastly, we have sa publishing naman, wherein ebooks are increasingly available. Lastly, we have competitive forces. An important part of an external audit is identifying rival firms and determining their strengths, weaknesses, capabilities, opportunities, threats, objectives, and strategies. So collecting and evaluating information on competitors is essential for successful strategy formulation. So isa sa mga strategies ng isang organization or isang firm is to collect information against their competitors. And actually, identifying major competitors is not always easy kasi maraming firms na they have divisions that compete in different industries. And many multi-divisional firms do not provide sales and profit information on a divisional basis for competitive reasons, of course. So also, yung mga privately held firms, they do not publish any financial or marketing information. Now, we have here 7 characteristics na masasabi natin na competitive yung isang company. First, for them, market share matters, and then they understand and remember precisely what business they are in, and then whether it's broke or not, they fix it and make it better, not just yung product, but the whole company as a whole if necessary. They innovate or evaporate, particularly sa mga technology-driven businesses, and then acquisition is essential to growth. The most successful purchases are those products or services na mabebenta talaga to a particular kind or group of people. And they know that people make a difference. They work hard. And lastly, for them, there is no substitute for quality and no greater threat than failing to be competitive on a global basis. Now we have this what we call competitive intelligence or CI. As formally defined by the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals or the SCIP, it is a systematic and ethical process for gathering and analyzing information about the competition's activities and general business trends to further a business' own goals. So, good competitive intelligence in business is one of the keys to success. Of course, dapat we have this competitive mindset, not competitive in a bad way, but yun nga, be a good intelligently competitive person. Now, the more information and knowledge a firm can obtain about their competitors, the more likely na they can formulate and implement effective strategies for their own. Major competitors' weaknesses can represent external opportunities sa isang firm. At the same time, major competitors' strengths may represent key threats. Also, hiring top executives from rival firms is also a way of some companies to obtain competitive intelligence. For instance, sa case ng Facebook and MySpace. just 2 days after Facebook's COO or the Chief Operating Officer Owen Van Natta left the company in 2009, he accepted the CEO job at MySpace, replacing then the CEO and co-founder Chris DeWolf. So see, these kind of situations are somehow strategies ng mga firms to obtain information from their competitors since both firms, Facebook and MySpace, are fierce rivals in the internet social networking business. So para makakuha ng information from the rivals, so they actually hired the top executives from the rival firm. Now, meron ding mga cases wherein computer spies are breaking into others' programs just to have or just to obtain the information from the rivals. And because of those situations, as a consequence, we have these 3 strong misconceptions about business intelligence. First, running an intelligence program requires lots of people, computers, and other resources. Second, collecting intelligence about competitors violates antitrust laws. Business intelligence equals espionage. And lastly, intelligence gathering is an unethical business practice. Remember, these are misconceptions, strong misconceptions about business intelligence. Kasi yun nga, based sa na-mention natin sa previous slides, there are some tactics or moves na ginagawa yung isang firm na unethical just to get an information to other companies, to their competitors. Remember, unethical tactics such as bribery, wiretapping, and computer break-ins should never be used to obtain information. And again, the internet, we have internet. And internet become an excellent medium for gathering competitive intelligence, information gathering also from employees, managers, suppliers, creditors, and even consultants can make the difference between having superior or just average intelligence and overall competitiveness. So you don't have to do some unethical behavior just to get some information about your rivals. Therefore, firms need an effective competitive intelligence or CI program, and we have here 3 basic objectives. First, to provide a general understanding of an industry and its competitors. Second, to identify areas in which competitors are vulnerable and to assess the impact strategic actions would have on competitors. And lastly, we have to identify potential moves that a competitor might make that would endanger a firm's position in the market. Remember, competitive information is equally applicable for strategy formulation, implementation, and valuation decisions. So, an effective CI program allows all areas of a firm to access consistent and verifiable information in making decisions. So, lahat ng members of an organization from Chief Executive Officer to custodians are valuable intelligence agents and should feel themselves to be a part of the CI process. Now, in an organization, there have been an increasing emphasis on competitive analysis. That's why sa mga corporations, naging function na to sa organizational charts under job titles such as Director of Competitive Analysis, Competitive Strategy Manager, Director of Information Services, or Associate Director of Competitive Assessment. So, when we say competitive analysis, it is a strategy that involves researching major competitors to gain insight into their products, sales, and marketing tactics. So, implementing stronger business strategies, warding off competitors, and capturing market shares are just a few benefits of conducting a competitive market analysis. So, the responsibilities of a director of competitive analysis include planning, collecting data, analyzing data, facilitating the process of gathering and analyzing data, disseminating intelligence on a timely basis, researching special issues, and recognizing what information is important and who needs to know. So this is very important since if you really want to know more about your competitors and for you also to be ahead of them and be successful. Now, by definition, we all know kapag sinabi natin competitors, they are those firms that offer similar products and services in the same market. And markets can be geographic or product areas or segments. So, for example, sa insurance industry, the markets are broken down into commercial or consumer, health or life, or even Europe or Asia. That's why yung mga researchers, they use the terms market commonality and research similarity to study rivalry among competitors. So when we say market commonality, this can be defined as the number and significance of markets that a firm competes in with rivals. While resource similarity naman, it is the extent to which the type and amount of a firm's internal resources are comparable to a rival. So, one way para ma-analyze natin yung competitiveness between two or among several firms is to investigate market commonality and resource similarity issues while looking for areas of potential competitive advantage along each firm's value chain. So that's it for my part. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Cassey Ivy B Abinal, and now let's continue the report starting with the competitive forces. Competitive forces. Collecting and evaluating information on competitors is essential for successful strategy formulation. Identifying major competitors is not always easy because many firms have divisions that compete in different industries. Many multi-divisional firms do not provide sales and profit information on a divisional basis for competitive reasons. Also, privately held firms do not publish any financial or marketing information. So once again, collecting and evaluating information on competitors is essential for successful strategy formulation. So it is very important part of research that you got to determine what the competitors are doing, what strategies are they taking. So this is an important point because you may actually be taking the wrong strategy or they might be doing a strategy that you weren't aware of. Now let's move forward to the key questions about competitors, and this includes what are the strengths and weaknesses that you need to consider, what are the steps they are taking, how they are overcoming the threats, and how they are overcoming the weaknesses. So these are all the questions provided that you might actually ask when you conduct your research. So sometimes it is very hard going to competitor and try to determine what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So there are ways of conducting such research. So if you want to know the market size they're going into, you may go to the websites. You can even have someone that you actually working from that organization that you might know, either through social media that you can actually get some information of, and you can also have articles. So they're all information that you can actually take and analyze and see how they actually conducting their own strategies. Competitive intelligence programs. So, competitive intelligence, as formally defined by the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals, is a systematic and ethical process for gathering and analyzing information about the competition's activities and general business trends to further a business own goals. And to better understand what this competitive intelligence is, let's watch this video.
What is competitive intelligence, and how do businesses use it? In the simplest of terms, competitive intelligence is a process that makes your business more competitive. If we think of business as a race, then the goal of business is to get to the finish line first. The finish line in business can mean a lot of different things. It could be the successful launch of a new product, or increasing sales, or perhaps improved customer service. Regardless of the goal, getting to the finish line first isn't as simple as being the fastest. There are a lot of obstacles between your business and the finish line. For example, there are competitors. Some are big, well-established companies that dominate the market. They have lots of resources but can be slow to react. There are small competitors. They might not have vast resources, but they are nimble and innovative and can quickly react to changing market factors. Ignoring your competitors is dangerous, since they are often racing or lumbering toward the same finish line. But competitors aren't the only thing standing between your company and your business objective. Regulatory and trade issues can slow down your progress or detour your strategy. Knowing where those hurdles are and how to avoid them is an important part of running a smart race. There are other market events that can detour your strategy as well. Being able to foresee and plan for disruptive technologies, industry consolidation, and industry trends can help ensure you reach your goal. In the competitive intelligence world, we call this the competitive landscape. Can you imagine trying to run a race with a blindfold on? The chances of getting to the finish line first, or even at all, are pretty slim. That is where competitive intelligence comes in. Competitive intelligence can help your company understand and navigate the competitive landscape. By researching such things as competitors, regulatory environment, and industry trends, competitive intelligence can help you plot a course that will ensure you reach your business objective. But where does the information come from, and how do we get it? Competitive intelligence information can come from a number of places, including published reports, financial statements, websites, and articles. This kind of research is often referred to as secondary research and would include anything that you can find on Google or at your public library. For a more detailed look at competitor or industry requires primary research. Primary research is information that is gathered directly from the people who have the information. Primary intelligence comes from conversations with industry experts, competitors, former employees, vendors, and customers. The benefit of primary research is that it provides the most detailed and comprehensive view of the competitive landscape. However, it's important to understand the legal and ethical guidelines concerning primary research. In most cases, companies will need to hire a third-party vendor to conduct primary research on their behalf. Once the primary and secondary information has been gathered, it is then analyzed and processed. The analysis can be supported by different technology applications. But ultimately, it requires the skill and perspective of human analysis to get the most out of the information. The result of this process is competitive intelligence. Let's review. Your business objective is the finish line. Everything between you and the finish line is the competitive landscape. Trying to navigate the competitive landscape with a blindfold on doesn't make a lot of sense. Competitive intelligence can remove the blindfold and help your company see the competitive obstacles that lie between you and your goal. Competitive intelligence can be gathered from secondary research, such as Google or Hoover's, but for detailed, customized information, you need primary research. Remember, to protect your company from legal or ethical breaches, it's a good idea to utilize a vendor to support your primary research needs. That is where we come in. Sedulo is a full-service competitive and market intelligence consulting firm. Contact us today to learn more about how we can help you get from here to here.
Firm-level strategy answers the question, how should we compete against a particular firm? We might heard of Microsoft creating Xbox. Next thing you know is the Sony counters with PlayStation. So instead of competing with industries with an industry, most firms compete directly with just a few companies within it. So direct competition is the rivalry between two companies offering similar products or services that acknowledge each other as rivals and take offensive and defensive position as they act and react to each other's strategic actions. Market commonality. From the two words combined, we have the market and commonality, parang market in common. So, it can be defined as the number and significance of markets that a firm competes in with rivals. So, it is the overlapping products, services, or customers in multiple common markets. So, take for an instance, in a food industry, firm competes over access to customer groups. Next one, we have the resource similarity from the word resource and similarity. So it is the extent to which the type and amount of a firm's internal resources are comparable to a rival. So it is in which a competitor has similar amounts and kinds of resources, that is similar assets, capability, processes, information, and knowledge used to create and sustain an advantage over competitors. So take for an instance, in a financial industry, firms compete for access of capital. On the right side, there is a figure for the framework of direct competition. So take for an instance, for McDonald's and Wendy's, for the market commonality, the degree is high, and for the resource similarity, the degree is low. So as you can see, so McDonald's is square, and then yung sa Wendy's is triangle and nag-overlap sila. So, different shape and merong overlapping. For the McDonald's and the Luby's cafeterias, for the market commonality is low and for the resource similarity is low. So, different shape and malayo, hindi sila masyadong nag-overlap, konti lang. And for the McDonald's and the Burger King, high commonality and the resource similarity is also high. So, same shape and malaki yung overlap nila. So, yan yung pag mayroong high market commonality and high resource similarity. And if there is a low market commonality and high resource similarity, so magiging itsura niya is like the McDonald's and in the Subway. So, same shape, but maliit lang yung nag-overlap. Michael Porter's 5 Forces framework was developed in 1979 as a simple but powerful tool for understanding the competitiveness of any business environment. So he came about this model when he recognized that more organizations keep a close watch on their rivals, but also he encouraged them to look beyond the actions of their competitors. So he identified 5 forces that make up the competitive environment, which are the rivalry among existing competitors, threat of new entrants, threat of substitutes, power of buyers, and power of suppliers. So in the middle is the rivalry among the competing firms, which basically talks about the competing organization, and it is surrounded by the threats that is about having a substitute product or from new competitors or from bargaining power or bargaining power of supplies. So let's examine these factors one by one. So in a competitive rivalry, the first of Porter's 5 forces look at the number and strength of your competitors. So how many rivals do you have? Sino-sino sila? And how does the quality of their products and services compare with yours? So in an intense rivalry, companies attract customers by aggressively cutting prices and launching high-impact marketing campaigns. But cutting off prices means it's easy for suppliers and buyers to go elsewhere if they feel that they're not getting a good deal from you. So on the other hand, when yung competitive rivalry is minimal lang and no one else is doing what you do, then you likely have tremendous competitor power as well as healthy profits. Next one, we have the supplier power. Supplier power is determined by how easy it is for your suppliers na taasan yung prices ng products nila. Again, how easy it is for your suppliers na taasan yung prices ng products nila. How many potential suppliers do you have? How unique is the product or services that they provide? And how expensive would it be to switch from one supplier to another? So the more suppliers you have to choose from, so the easier it will be to switch to a cheaper alternative. Conversely, kung maliit lang naman yung suppliers mo, so the more you rely on them for help, the stronger their position and ability na taasan yung prices. So this can impact ability. For example, if you're forced into expensive contracts. Next one, we have the buyer power. So if the number of buyers is low compared to the number of suppliers in an industry, then they have what's known as buyer power. So they have the ability na liitan yung prices ng product. So mas nakakalamang ang buyer because since maraming suppliers, they likely find it easy to switch to new, cheaper competitors, which can ultimately drive down prices. So if you are in a business, think about how many buyers you have. How big are their orders? How much would it cost them to switch from your products and services to those of a rival? So are your buyers strong enough to dictate terms to you? So when you deal with only a few savvy customers, then they have more power. However, if you have many customers and little competition, then mas malakas yung power mo. Next is the threat of substitution. This refers to the likelihood of your customers finding a different way of doing what you do. So take for an instance, if you supply a unique software product that automates an important process, people may substitute it by doing the process manually or by outsourcing it. So another example ng substitution to better understand. So you may be someone who enjoys coffee. So when your tells you to lay off the caffeine, you may consider switching to flowering tea or something similar. So this creates the threat of substitute products or services you can encounter. So a substitution that's easy and cheap to make can weaken your position and threaten profitability because mag-lower ang sales mo since more prefer substitutes with lower prices. Next one is the threats of new entry. Your position can be affected by people's ability to enter your market. So if it takes little money and effort to enter your market and compete effectively, or if you have little protection for your key technologies, then rivals can quickly enter your market and weaken your position. However, if you have strong and durable barriers to entry, then you can preserve a favorable position and take fair advantage of it. So is it relatively easy for a new competitor to gain a foothold in your industry or market, and how much would it cost? And how tightly is your secure regulated? Do new entrants come and go regularly, or is the industry dominated by a few or big players? So yan yung mga questions na we take into consideration when there is a threat of new entry. So for example, a business facing a high threat of new entrants may decide to patent its technology, bring down cost to sell its product at a more competitive price, or you may find ways to differentiate its offering by advertising its unique features and benefits. After knowing the Porter's 5 forces model, the next question is how to use this model. So to use this model, start by looking at each of the 5 forces in turn and how they apply in your industry. Ask yourself the following questions. First, is rivalry between competitors intense, or do you tend to retain customers relatively easily? Second, do you have lots of suppliers to choose from, or do you rely heavily on a small group of suppliers? Third, is buyer power high or low? Fourth, would buyers find it easy to substitute your product or service? And lastly, do new competitors find it easy to enter the market, or is it difficult? So after you've considered these questions, write down each of the 5 forces and summarize the size and scale of each using your findings. So an easy way of doing this is to use a single plus sign for a force that's moderately in your favor, or a negative sign for a force that's moderately against you. Use double positive sign for a force, or plus plus for a force that's strongly in your favor, or double negative sign or minus minus for one that's strongly against. So for a neutral force, you can use zero or zero. Finally, think about how your analysis will likely impact you. Bear in mind that few situations are perfect, but analyzing your industry using Porter's 5 forces can help you think through what you can change to improve your competitive position and increase your profitability. A wealth of strategic information is available to organizations from both published and unpublished sources. So generally, publication occurs on the date on which copies of the work are first made available to the public. On the other hand, unpublished works are those which have not been distributed in any manner. So example of published sources are the customer surveys, market research, speeches at professional and shareholders meeting, television programs, interviews and conversations with stakeholders. And for the unpublished sources, we have the periodicals, journals, reports, government documents, abstracts, books, directories, newspapers, and manuals. Here are other sources of strategic information. We have the excellent websites for gathering strategic information. So here are the 6 that the author uses routinely. We have the marketwatch.multexinvestor.com, moneycentral.msn.com, finance.yahoo.com, www.clearstation.com, us.etrade.com, and www.hoovers.com. Also, most college libraries subscribe to Standard and Poor's industry surveys. These documents are exceptionally up to date and give valuable information about many industries. So each report is authored by a Standard and Poor's industries research analyst and includes the following sections. We have the current environment, industry trends, how the industry operates, key industry ratios and statistics, how to analyze a company, glossary of terms, additional industry information, references, and comparative company financial analysis. So again, these are the sources in order to gather strategic information.
Assalamu alaikum and good day. I am Balang Hussein and I'm going to discuss the forecasting tools and techniques. Forecasting is a complex activity because of factors such as technological innovation, cultural changes, new products, improved services, stronger competitors, shifts in government priorities, changing social values, unstable economic conditions, and unforeseen events. Managers often rely on published forecasts to effectively identify key external opportunities and threats. So, a sense of the future permeates all action and underlies every decision a person makes. People eat expecting to be satisfied and nourished in the future. People sleep assuming that in the future they will feel rested. They invest energy, money, and time because they believe their efforts will be rewarded in the future. They build highways assuming that automobiles and trucks will need them in the future. Parents educate children on the basis of forecasts that they will need certain skills, attitudes, and knowledge when they grow up. That is how we define a forecast in a logical way. Many publications and sources on the internet forecast external variables. Several published examples include Industry Week's Trends and Forecasts, Business Week's Investment Outlook, and Standard and Poor's Industry Survey. The reputation and continued success of these publications depend partly on the accurate forecasts, so published sources of information can offer excellent projections. An especially good website for industry forecasts is finance.yahoo.com. Just insert the firm's stock symbol and go from there. Forecasting tools can be broadly categorized into two techniques. We have quantitative forecast and qualitative forecast. Quantitative forecasts are most appropriate when historical data are available and when the relationships among key variables are expected to remain the same in the future. For example is linear regression, where it is based on the assumption that the future will be just like the past. So the second one is qualitative forecasts, where it is subjective, based on the opinion and the judgment of consumers and experts. Informed opinion and judgment, Delphi method, and market research are some of the examples of qualitative forecasts. So let's now proceed to the making assumptions. Planning would be impossible without assumptions. McConkie defines assumptions as the best present estimates of the impact of major external factors over which the manager has little if any control, but which may exert a significant impact on performance or the ability to achieve desired results. Strategists are faced with countless variables and imponderables that can be neither controlled nor predicted with 100% accuracy. Wild guesses should never be made in formulating strategies, but reasonable assumptions based on available information must always be made. Assumptions are needed only for future trends and events that are most likely to have a significant effect on the company's business. Based on the best information at the time, assumptions serve as checkpoints on the validity of strategies. If future occurrences deviate significantly from assumptions, strategists know that corrective actions may be needed. Without reasonable assumptions, the strategy formulation process could not proceed effectively. Firms that have the best information generally make the most accurate assumptions, which can lead to major competitive advantages. Let's now proceed to industry analysis, the external factor evaluation matrix or EFE matrix. External factor evaluation matrix or EFE matrix. It allows strategists to summarize and evaluate economic, social, cultural, demographic, environmental, political, governmental, legal, technological, and competitive information. We have an example of this, but before that, I will show you the 5 steps on how EFE matrix can be developed. The first step is we list key external factors as identified in the external audit process. We include a total of 15 to 20 factors, including both opportunities and threats that affect the firm and its industry. Now we list the opportunities first and then the threats. We have to be specific as possible using percentages, ratios, and comparative numbers whenever possible. As what Edward Deming said, "In God we trust, everyone else bring data." So this second step on how we can develop the EFE matrix is we assign to each factor a weight that ranges from 0 to 1. The weight indicates the relative importance of that factor to being successful in the firm's industry. Opportunities often receive higher weights than threats, but threats can receive high weights if they are especially severe or threatening. Appropriate weights can be determined by comparing successful with unsuccessful competitors or by discussing the factor and reaching a group consensus. The sum of all weights assigned to the factors must equal to 1. The third step is we assign a rating between 1 and 4 to each key external factor to indicate how effectively the firm's current strategies respond to the factor, where 4, the response is superior; if 3, the response is above average; if 2, the response is average; and 1, and if 1, the response is poor. Ratings are based on effectiveness of the firm's strategies. Ratings are thus company-based, whereas the weights in step 2 are industry-based. It is important to note that both threats and opportunities can receive a 1, 2, 3, or 4. The fourth step is we multiply each factor's weight by its rating to determine a weighted score. And the last step is we sum the weighted scores for each variable to determine the total weighted score for the organization. This table is an sample illustration of EFE matrix. So this is an EFE matrix for a local 10 theater cinema complex. So we have here 7 opportunities and 8 threats. So the total weighted score is 1.0. The average total weighted score is 2.5. A total weighted score of 4.0 indicates that an organization is responding in an outstanding way to existing opportunities and threats in its industry. In other words, the firm's strategies effectively take advantage of existing opportunities and minimize the potential adverse effects of external threats. A total score of 1.0 indicates that the firm's strategies are not capitalizing on opportunities or avoiding external threats. So let's now move on to the competitive profile matrix or CPM. The competitive profile matrix identifies a firm's major competitors and its particular strengths and weaknesses in relation to a sample firm's strategic position. The weights and total weighted scores in both CPM and an EFE have the same meaning. However, critical success factors in a CPM include both internal and external issues. Therefore, the ratings refer to strength and weaknesses, where if 4 is a major strength, if 3 it is a minor strength, if 2 it is a minor weakness, and 1 is a major weakness. The critical success factors in a CPM are not grouped into opportunities and threats as they are in an EFE. In a CPM, the ratings and total weighted scores for rival firms can be compared to the sample firm. This comparative analysis provides important internal strategic information. This is an example of competitive profile matrix. In this table, the two most important factors to being successful in the industry are advertising and global expansion, as indicated by weights of 0.20. If there were no weight column in this analysis, note that each factor then would be equally important. Thus, having a weight column makes for a more robust analysis because it enables the analyst to assign higher and lower numbers to capture perceived or actual levels of importance. Note that in this table, the Company 1 is strongest on product quality, as indicated by a rating of 4, whereas Company 2 is strongest on advertising. Overall, Company 1 is strongest, as indicated by the total weighted score of 3.15. So that's all on our discussion. Thank you.